6:23, let's get to your Capitol Watch. We've mentioned it briefly already in the newscast, but questioning begins today for Judge Jackson.
Yeah, let's bring in our national correspondent, Joe St. George, to get more on what the toughest questions likely are going to be for Judge Jackson and who's going to be asking them. Good morning, Joe.
Hey, good morning, guys. You know, yesterday the confirmation hearing technically began with opening statements, but really, if you were watching, it got a bit boring after a while, it got a bit long-winded at times. Today is really when the drama, if you will, begins, because this is when the senators are going to be able to ask Judge Jackson directly her thoughts on certain issues. Now, the judge isn't expected to reveal too much. Typically, they're told to avoid controversy at all costs during these hearings, but it is a fascinating proceeding. And after all, this is a woman who could serve on the high court for decades. So what are some of the hot topics we can show you on screen, and we've been showing you on screen? They're going to ask about her past work, who she represented when she was a public defender, such as well as her past defense of Guantanamo Bay detainees. Expect conservatives like Senator Hawley of Missouri to ask about her past sentences of sex offenders, for instance. He has said on Twitter and elsewhere that he believes some of her sentences were too lenient. The Democrats, they're going to ask about abortion, Roe v. Wade. It's assumed that she supports Roe v. Wade, but there hasn't been a ton of rulings on the issue. Again, we expect the judge to take a position of neutrality on most of these topics today. You'll hear the word legal precedent a lot from the judge, and says she typically follows that. The conservatives on your screen are the ones who are going to be asking the toughest questions. They're expected, many of them, to be future presidential and vice presidential contenders. But you know what? Got to be honest, guys. This isn't the most polarizing, the most controversial of confirmation processes that we've seen in the last several years. This isn't Justice Amy Coney Barrett taking over for Justice Ginsburg. This isn't the scandals that engulfed Justice Kavanaugh during his confirmation hearings. But you know this, just one question, just one wrong answer by the judge could change it all in an instant.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, before you go, we're hearing Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is willing to not join NATO this morning to stop the war.
Yeah, what's the latest on that you might be hearing? Also, we know President Biden's getting ready to head to Europe.
Yeah, he'll head to Brussels tomorrow. By the end of the week, he'll make a stop in Poland, which neighbors Ukraine. So he's heading to the doorstep of this conflict, really, to reassure Europe that the U.S. stands with NATO and the NATO military alliance. It's also meant to send a message to President Putin that the U.S. is not relenting in any way here. You asked about President Zelensky and how he said NATO, not joining NATO, could be a way to end the ceasefire. That's significant. We can show you President Putin's demands, and that was one of them. President Putin doesn't want Ukraine to join NATO. He wants Ukraine to remain neutral going forward. That's one way we could get to a ceasefire here. But additionally, President Putin wants a disarmament of some degree from Ukraine. And that's where we're going to begin to get some controversy here, because President Zelensky doesn't want to leave his nation defenseless for a possible future invasion. Also questions over land areas. So the good news is that we're starting to see some demands that both sides have. Some may be easier than others to meet in the goal of creating a ceasefire. But oh, by the way, if you're living in Ukraine right now and you're watching these images out of Ukraine right now, the violence continues. The atrocity continues with missiles and new assaults on different regions. So a lot of news this week, with the president again expected to land in Brussels tomorrow.
All right, thank you, Joe St. George, for us live at our nation's capital with the very latest this morning.
Coming up next on News 5.